Hello everyone, my name is Tori Hall and today I'm going to be presenting on the topic of Globe Theatre. Created in 1599, the Globe Theatre was the creation of Richard and Cuthbert Burbage, two entrepreneurs alongside Shakespeare and four other actors. Prior to being an infamous playwright, Shakespeare was actually an actor in the company of the Lord Chamberlain's Mint. Having to constantly rent a place to perform, they built their own theatre when the opportunity came along. Shakespeare was also a financial investor in the theatre and hence was able to make a profit off the building and its shows. He later rose to great fame when he began writing and conducting his own plays, hence the amphitheatre now being commonly known as Shakespeare's Globe. So here we can kind of see a glimpse of the theater and what it's going to entail. You can see that it is an outdoor theater and it is exposed. You can kind of see off in the siding there is stages. So there is 3 tiers. You have ground level, second tier, and third level. So as you can see in this picture, the theater was an outside theater and similar to an amphitheater. The construction and shape allowed for conductive sound and good acoustics. The roundness created an inclusive and communal feel along with the audience. This theater was not only innovative in architecture but also society. The open floor and 3 tiers allowed for all social classes an option of seating. So what was so special about this theater is that there wasn't often a microphone as we have now. So back then it was purely based off the projection. The roundness of the theater was able to let somebody speak softly or loudly and it still created an echo. So if you were in the back, you could still hear what was going on in the front with little to no ease. So the acoustics was quite amazing and they still actually do that to this day. So we're also going to see on the sides, as I said before, we have the 3 tiers, or the 2 tiers, I guess. So back in the day, theater wasn't really open to every walk of life. You had social classes who weren't allowed to come or weren't really able to go. Here it kind of changed. So as you can see on the top tier, you're able to have people of higher class who would pay to go up there. The second tier is more reserved for middle class, and then the open floor was actually for people who could pay £1 to go see. So it was able to be inclusive for everybody, which was really amazing at the time. So let's talk a little bit about the history. The theater brought out commoners and the Queen of England. It became a success in the community and grew vastly popular. For a little over than 20 years, the theater was actually a success until it tragically caught fire and perished. However, that was not the end, and it was rebuilt in 1644. But at this time, there's a little bit more going on that kind of brought another downfall. During this time, the Puritans placed a ban on theater, and it was actually tore down and created tenant buildings from the wood. So it no longer existed, and instead they had built buildings in the place of it. So as time passed, the theater was far from being forgotten, and in the 1970s, an actor by the name of Sam Wanamaker actually had a dream to rebuild the infamous building. In 1989, the original foundations were found buried beneath the bankside, and his dream began to come alive. So, a little bit more knowledge about this. So this was actually alongside the Thames River, and as time has progressed, it's actually shrank. So as it has shrunk, the banks of the river have exposed new things, and one of those was actually old wood when it was torn down. So they're actually able to restore and rebuild the Globe Theater with some of the original wood, which is really incredible. Another interesting fact is that the wood used to rebuild the amphitheater after the fire was actually stolen wood. So there's history along the creation of it throughout time. So in 1997, the Globe Theater breathed new life and opened its doors for the first time. So let's go back and think. This man had a dream in the 1970s, came to fruition in 1989, and finally made a remarkable opening in 1997. This is centuries later. This is from 1644 when it was torn down. It is incredible that it has been brought back to life from that time forward. So let's move on. So here we can see a little bit more of the pictures. I want to go ahead and talk about the structure. So as we were talking about the acoustics and the structure, you can see the roundness of the building. You can also see the roof on the top picture. That is a thatch roof. It is to be noted that thatch was actually banned and outlawed due to the risk of fire. So to be able to actually bring that incredible feature back, they actually had to get a permit to be able to build it and go through a lot of things and steps and processes to actually make it happen. So it's really interesting to see that that was able to kind of reinforce the uniqueness of it from 1600s. So we can also see the three tiers here and the open floor. I also wasn't able to mention this prior, but we're going to talk about it now. The stage was actually meant for royals. They would sit on the sidelines, so much to the point that Shakespeare, to mock the royals, actually wrote them into his plays. So whereas they would sit on the side and actually make notes and speeches about the plays, Shakespeare wrote in their own thoughts, so it was to mock them, which is really funny now that I think about it, and quite interesting. So modern day, what is the Globe Theater? The Globe Theater now sits 600 feet from its original location. The only reason it's not at the original location is one, due to the River Thames shrinking, but also there are still tenant houses from where they built them originally. Now, it remains open to the people, and it houses very wonderful plays that can be viewed in the same way it was enjoyed 4 centuries ago. Due to zoning and health regulations, the theater has a much smaller capacity, only fitting 1,600 people compared to the previous 3,000. That is not to say that the architecture is actually smaller, but rather that they have zoning issues and regulations to follow. Back then, there was nobody to say, hey, if there's a fire, we need to have a pathway out. Whereas we do now, we need to have space for medics and people to come in and help when needed. So it essentially is around the same size, but regulations have caused it to not be able to be packed full to the brim as it was in the 1600s. So, what was the Globe Theater? The Globe Theater now today has this really amazing thing of bringing the community together. People say that there's a real communal feeling, and this one person even quoted so much to going and saying, you're in on the action. So if we think back to going to a football game, everybody's there cheering on the actors, and it's a really interactive experience versus what we would see now if we went to a ballet or just any theater production. Because as you can see, a little bit of the people on the bottom level, you are one with the actors. One, they're using projection, so there's no help other than their own voice, but they also can interact with you. There was one play played here a while back. I was watching a review somebody had made from going to the Globe Theatre in London, and the actual actors sprayed the audience, kind of like a 4D motion picture, with bourbon, and even interacted in a monologue saying that they would spray them throughout if they acted up. What other theater does that? It's a very interesting experience that I think anybody would really benefit from.